look, I know you and I have talked about this before, and I know you said you're glad, Facebook and Twitter didn't exist back when you played. Because
Oh,
listen, man,
yeah.
I mean, you have some shitheads out there who will tweet a college kicker, oh, go eat bleach, or I'm gonna, find your family and all these kinds of things. Uh, and look, I know a lot of people listening are going to say, well, Chiefs fans would never say that. Well, there are a few of those out there. I mean, every fan base, okay? Because you just never know. I mean, some people really do take it personally. And listen, look, here are my teams, okay? I'm a Chiefs fan. I'm a Royals fan. I'm a KU football fan, okay? Like my teams have like the Vegas Golden Knights are playing soon, okay? My teams have either choked it or have been terrible or have blown big leads. Like I've just learned to kind of laugh about it because listen, it is sports. It's not your daily life. Like this isn't life or death. Okay, and I get yeah, sure. I don't get me wrong. I curse and shout at the TV just like any other
Sure.
sports fans,
Yeah.
but I think some people just do take it because here's one thing, and I think the last couple of weeks I've had a different perspective because Eric Warfield and Jason Dunn, both who played in the Carl Peterson era,
Oh, sure.
they've been on my podcast lately, and we had some honest conversations. Eric was open and honest about his DUIs that he had here in Kansas City, and he mentioned someone just sent a shitty comment to him once when he was doing his podcast that he does the Chief Concerns podcast with Marcus Dash, a good friend of mine, and he mentioned that look, words hurt. Things that people want to say or people want to bring up his past and whatnot. And I understand that. I'm not debunking that at all. Here's the thing: at the end of the day, no one's ever going to say that kind of thing to your face. Like everyone has a lot to say, on the phone, on the keyboard, whatever, but they're never going to say it to your face. Which I kind of, and please let me know if I'm part of the problem because look, I make jokes about Brody Croyle and all these bad players we've had over the years in Kansas City. A lot of sports fans do, but you kind of forget sometimes that these people are human too. They've got kids. In fact, I'll tell you a quick story and I'll let you respond to this. I remember when Charlie Weiss was the head coach of Kansas his first year, his son Charlie Weiss Jr. joined him, and I remember he shared a story when his dad was the head coach at Notre Dame. He would have to go to school every day during that final season and hear kids talk about how they wanted the head coach to be fired. And I kind of thought about that because he and I are the same age just about, and I thought, man, that has to hurt, people talking, because listen, your dad could be an accountant, no one's talking about his job, but
Right.
your dad is the head coach of a big school, and you have to deal with the criticisms on a daily basis.
Yeah, it's got to be. I think it's got to be actually harder on the families than it does because as your children see you as whether it's you're their mom or you're their dad or you're their uncle or cousin or brother or sister or whatever. That's how they see you, right? That's how your
Yeah.
family sees you. They just see, my family saw me as little Joey, South Philly kid, grew up, blah blah blah. Like that's who they see me as. No one ever saw me as an NFL player. I mean, this is not the way they perceive it, and I think we lose a little bit of perspective in that matter when we're thinking about those people out there that are professional athletes or they're on a stage. Now, I think so I think it's harder on the people that are around them than the people. I wouldn't take it. I take everything with a grain of salt. If someone was to say to me, here was Joe was drafted in seventh round, or second round, he only played 5-6 years, blah blah. Like, okay, well I did it, and that's what I did, and that would hurt if somebody said that he should have played longer, or he didn't contribute as much as he did, or whatever. But like, I just know that, hey, there's this, what's the old Spider-Man saying, with great power comes great responsibility, right? So I
Mhm.
understand that. I understand that when you take on a job and a role like that you're going to be in the public eye, because the economics of it are that's what drives the salaries. That's what drives you being on that team, is the fans coming to see the games. It's TV contracts. It's all the things that go with being an athlete. And I get that. But I do think, Farzin, I think you're right. I think sometimes we, as fans, will forget sometimes that these are just people. I'm
Yeah.
just a guy who happened to get lucky and, had some, size, speed, whatever, and was able to catch some scout's eye and get to college and get to the NFL and do it. But I'm just a person. I don't, we're not made of, athletes and entertainers aren't made of anything differently than blood and bones and skin, and so I don't even know where I'm going with this. I'm kind of rambling.
No,
but it
is great.
But it is really, it's got to be harder on the people around that person, because it's not fair to them to hear somebody, Charlie Weiss, to hear his kids hear about, whether his dad should be fired, or, and the way that I always look at it is, it's like anything in life. I've been in management now since I left football, and one thing I always do is I always remember to criticize privately and praise publicly, right? And I always remember that when I'm working with teams and trying to coach people to be better professionally or whatever they're doing, I always keep in mind that, well, number one, you've got to keep things in perspective, and that, it's about the behaviors that you want to be critical of rather than the person.
Yeah.
If when Lynn Elliott, use that example again, he misses that field goal. It was the behavior of what happened. It was his leg not hitting the ball at the right angle, and the ball going through those skinny little uprights, right? It was the behavior of what happened. It was the action. It wasn't who Lynn Elliott was. Lynn Elliott did not want to miss those field goals.
Yeah, for sure.
And I think we forget to separate those two things sometimes, and we do it sometimes, when we're scolding kids or for doing something bad or wrong, and we forget that you got to criticize the behavior, not the person. It didn't make Lynn Elliott a bad person that he missed those field goals. They were bad behaviors, and they were bad actions that came out of whatever happened there. But and that's what I think sometimes we lose sight of, because remember, it's only gotten worse, right? With social media, you're a person on the screen. And it was so funny when I would see people in the community, and when I was in Kansas City, and you're right, how differently they would act when they saw you, and than when you were just a helmet and a number out on the field, right?
Yeah.
And my wife Jen used to hear it all the time in the stands, and Louis Aguiar, was a great friend, and my wife but really befriended his family, and so, Mr. and Mrs. Aguiar, would be sitting there, and Louis, shank a punt or whatever, and it was like, Aguiar, you stink, you're the worst, and it's like, here's his mom and dad,
Good
right?
Lord.
Here's a guy that's made it to the pinnacle of his profession, and people in the stands knowing full well that that's where the family section was, right? Used to be on basically the 30, 40 yard line, right behind the bench. I mean, that's where the family's under the overhang at Arrowhead. And like, they're just yelling out things about the players. And it's like, my God, like these are, what are you doing? Like, Louis is a great guy. He's got great parents. They used to feed us all the time. They make this fantastic, Mexican meals for us, like home cooked meals, and like they were like the sweetest people you'd ever meet in your life. And they were so good to my wife. She was young, we were young, and they would sit together and talk at the games, and when our families would out, we'd introduce. But it's just like, I just remember her coming home and being so wrought with like emotion about how hard that was for her to get used to hearing people talk about players. You stink, you're the worst, replace this player, do that, whatever. Yeah. And that's why I go back to that comment. I think it's harder on the people who are outside the circle than it is even the player, because when someone would tell me I stunk, I'm like, oh, whatever, I'm out here doing it, and you're not,
you're
or
living the
whatever.
dream. They'll talk shit about you, but they would gladly trade places with you, no question about it.
Of course, and they would, and they would all, and I'm sure people would always say that. Fans would always say that. Like I would take, for that kind of money, I'd take that kind of criticism. That's fine. Okay, well, And I was always okay with it. And I think a lot of players were always okay with it.
You know what's
But it
funny?
was, like I said,
No, I don't mean to cut you off. Here's the thing. It's
yeah,
like everyone wants, the glory and the social media followers. It's funny because, we're talking about families. Brittany Matthews, I mean, she gets lit up. And look, when she does all these selfies, in the middle of a game, like when a touchdown happens, okay, are they goofy? Yeah. Would it be annoying if Tom Brady's wife did that? Of course. But she's not killing anybody. She's not harming anybody. She's not doing
right.
anything wrong. She's just supporting her man. I mean, that's what wives, girlfriends do. But she gets killed sometimes for this stuff. And I remember someone sent a tweet saying, "Oh, wouldn't it be great if Patrick was single and he could do, so many things with different women?" And she responded to that tweet, and that guy got lit up on Twitter to the point where I think he actually he didn't block he locked his account where it's private and you can't read his tweets. So you have to be following that person in order to see it. So everyone has something to say. And then when the athlete or the family member responds, and look, there was an incident with this clown. I'll refrain from saying his name. He and I used to podcast on the same site. Just some guy who thought he knew it all. He attacks Tom Brady's child, his 5-year-old at the time, 5-year-old daughter. And I think people started talking about how Tom Brady was pissed. Like he actually hung up on the station after like a certain a length of time passed for his weekly radio segment. He was like, okay, I've reached my time. I'm getting paid for this. I'm gonna hang up on you guys now. Because he let it be known he was upset that someone on that same station made a comment about his daughter, and the discussion did come up. Look, athletes don't like the criticism, but they understand it. But when you make it personal or even involve their family members that way, like what the hell,
Yeah, no, it's out of bounds. It's off
Yeah.
limits. And it should be. Call me whatever you want. I understand the risk and I understand the reward of being in a position like that. And I think some people just feel like because players are ultimately funded, right? Air quotes again. If they're funded by the fans, right? I mean, if fans stop going to games, if fans stop watching television, there weren't advertising dollars. You see it with other sports, right? Where if it's not the fans and the funding and the popularity, the other sports don't make it to the NFL level. And I think fans to a certain degree feel like they have more because they feel like the players are getting something from them, that they have the right or the
Yeah.
privilege of being able to be critical of it.
I
And I
pay for
get
your
that.
house is what a lot of
I,
fans say.
I get that. I get that. But like you said, when it becomes personal and there's a line, and there's a line that people cross where
Yeah.
it goes from being a critical fan to being, like look, I'm just as guilty of it. I'm a huge Sixers fan, right? Philadelphia kid, watched them my whole life. Dr. J, World Be Free, going all the way back to the Daryl Dawkins days. I mean, always been a huge Sixers fan. And Joel Embiid did not have a good game the other night, right? I mean, it was terrible. He was 0 for 12 in the second half, and it's like, in my mind, I'm going, Joe, come on, like, dude, like one basket, like, and then the athlete in me goes, well, I was the guy that snapped one over the goalposts with the Rams. You know what I mean? Like, who am I?
Yeah.
There goes that stone again, right? And so, I think you get caught up in that perspective because you get so emotionally tied into sports. We get so emotionally tied into it. I saw it. I coached youth sports. I coached high school football for 11 years, and I saw so many families and parents and family friends just get so tied up in that moment. And it's like, guys, this is not, this isn't world peace. We're not curing cancer. We're not doing surgeries on operating room tables. Like, this is high school sports. This is youth sports. I was coaching 5th grade basketball, and I remember a brouhaha, that a coach, had, it was like, oh my God, he one guy went after a referee, a 16-year-old referee, followed her out, a male, 45-year-old male to a 16-year-old female,
Jesus.
and followed her out into a parking lot, and was like, berating her because of some calls that she did or didn't make in this fifth grade basketball league.
Yeah.
So I've took it upon myself to knock on his door, and I don't recommend anybody doing this. I'm not saying I don't condone this kind of behavior. It's just the emotion took over me because it was a family friend, and I just knocked on the door and I said, listen, I'm just going to tell you one thing. And I didn't threaten. I didn't say I'm going to do. I just said basically, I left a lot of a lot of unspoken words, and I said, you're not going to do that again.
Yeah.
And that's all I said. I didn't threaten. I didn't do. I just wanted to get my point across that this isn't that important. And if you want to enjoy your plastic fifth grade basketball trophy at the end of the year, by all means enjoy it. But I just said, you're not going to do that ever again.
It's just so weird. Like some people take the whole thing so personally too. Like my family and I, we know of another family. They actually took their kids off of a baseball team because the coach, who also has a kid on the team, would just berate these kids over a sport. Like, I mean, it's little league baseball. Like, chill out. I did want to share a funny story, kind of going back to the whole family thing. There was a UFC fighter named Chris Gutierrez. He's not like a famous fighter. He's not very well known, but I did watch him in a promotion called World Series of Fighting. It's now, they've rebranded it, and it's now called the Professionals Fighters League, excuse me. But when he was fighting at the World Series of Fighting, I remember in front of me, there was a family of 4, and they all like pulled out their phone and they're all recording his entrance. And I'm thinking, okay, this definitely is the family. Like, it has to be. And obviously they're more passionate about the match than we are. Neither of these guys are from Kansas City, so I don't have any emotional attachment to either one of these fighters. Whereas all of a sudden you hear this person's mom, the sister, and I think even the girlfriend, they're all shouting. And there were a group of people, to my right, a few rows down. They're like, oh yeah, go Chris's mom. Yeah, yell louder. And you're just hearing these comments. It's like, I'm thinking to myself, there might be another fight in the stands if these comments continue. But it's like, I even like looked at that moment right there. I'm like, listen, I've been to some regional MMA events where I'm sitting in front of or behind the family members. And I remember there was one fighter, he went for a cheap shot. In boxing or in UFC, at the beginning of the round, they'll touch gloves real quickly. Yeah, one fighter actually touched the glove and immediately went for a spinning back kick, which, look, I think that is just completely cheap. But I didn't say anything because that guy's family was sitting right in front of me. So, it's just, moments like that kind of do make me realize, okay, look, these people, their families, they take it to heart too. You still have the right to boo and cheer. I think you should, but be a little careful with what you say because you never know who you're sitting next to.
Right. Exactly. It's just like anything in life. You just want to act as if your mom is, standing next to you,
Yeah.